I'm delighted to be joined by Claire Fox today. Claire, I met you as a client and I had a wonderful time helping you build out your people function. It was such an honour and a privilege to partner with such an amazing organisation and such an amazing CPO. Claire, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
So I'm Claire Fox, as you said. I'm the Chief People Officer at Digital Science. My background is effectively half corporate. I started off in Unilever, spent 12 years in Unilever, then spent about 10 years in international development. So I was working at Save the Children International. I was COO at UNICEF, spent some time at the British Red Cross and various leadership roles there. Ran my own business for a bit, executive coaching and consulting, moved into this Chief People Officer role in a global high-growth SaaS business.
Amazing. And look, there's a lot of chat about AI, a little bit of fear-mongering around what that means for headcounts, what that means for transformation, workforce, planning, all the rest of it. I think you've got quite an interesting take on this, which we're going to unpack today. So do you think that AI is going to have a big impact on people teams?
I think it will definitely have a really big impact on people teams, but I'm not sure it's the impact that is the kind of common narrative, because at the moment there's a lot of talk about people teams getting smaller and jobs going away. And although I think there are some parts of the HR function, just in the way that there are some parts of all functions, finance, legal, operations, that will be impacted and potentially done differently, or potentially roles will go away. Actually, I think overall, the importance of the people team becomes even more significant in the context of organisations trying to achieve benefit from AI transformation.
Well, that's quite a different narrative to, the kind of headcount reduction that people are very, legitimately worried about. What areas of the people function do you think that might see more headcount growth, for example, or might need more kind of boots on the ground in order to help implement AI thoroughly?
So I think there's a whole piece around transformation and change that becomes even more important and challenging in the context of AI transformation. So skills and capabilities around driving change, translating business strategy and commercial knowledge and context into enterprise and workforce architecture. Chief People Officers with the skills to do that and then create a team with the capabilities to deliver on that is going to be a real source of competitive advantage. So skills around change, transformation, building trust, psychological safety, I think are all parts of the remit of many HR teams now that are just going to become more and more important. But I also think there are roles that don't exist now. So for some parts of the HR process that might be augmented with AI, for example, there's going to be new roles around quality control, around AI governance, around systems orchestration, around human AI partnerships, and how you design organisations with human AI partnerships and how you enable leaders and managers to operate effectively in that context.
So it's not simply a case of jobs will be lost, but it sounds like new roles will have to be created off the back of this.
Some things might happen fast, but other things might not happen as fast as people think, because when people talk about AI use cases in relation to, for example, HR operational work or recruitment work, things like that, often I think what people are really talking about is automation. And actually, there's loads of automation technology out there already, which companies haven't maximised and made the best of yet. It does cost money. Is that where people want to invest? And AI brings another layer around knowledge work and how you can use technology to facilitate and support knowledge work. But again, you can't introduce AI into processes that aren't already very clear, simple, effective. AI will make good processes even better, but it will make bad processes even worse.
Yeah, I think I've seen that from a recruitment perspective as well. I can't count the number of times a client has reached out to me for support with someone who can almost backtrack on an automation that was not done robustly enough.
Yeah.
Or, the key questions before you implement a project like that is what's the business case, what's the why, all of those kind of fundamental building blocks. I feel like a lot of organisations were just in a panic to kind of get things done or show that they were doing things so they wouldn't have been left behind almost.
And I think things are more expensive than people perhaps thought they would be, and more difficult to implement and get real benefit realization from some of these changes. But I think this is exactly where the people team can help, because, the people team does have and will need to build more expertise in process reengineering, systems thinking, work redesign, organizational architectures, so that it's the people team that helps businesses, once they've got an AI strategy, translate that into what does that mean? How do we implement it? How do we really embed it? And so all those levers around change and transformation, but also psychological safety, really brilliant executive coaching, and organisation adaptability. I think that's going to be really key. Organisations that can continuously learn, adapt and be more agile are the ones that are going to be able to benefit from automation and AI. It's it's well-skilled HR teams that can really help enable and embed that.
You've done a ton of work in this area. You mentioned before some new jobs will be created. So let's talk about those a bit more and unpack them, because I'm pretty sure people will want to, maybe if they haven't already, start thinking about these roles for their own organisation.
So I think if we look at the service delivery side and sort of first line response side of what HR teams deliver, there are parts of those roles that can be automated and facilitated and augmented with AI. But I think the new roles in that space is going to be about quality control, because an AI agent can't be held accountable for what it tells a line manager. So if it tells a line manager something that's an incorrect interpretation of a policy because it's agentic AI and it's decided that the policy in the US actually would work really well in the UK, but of course we know it wouldn't, there needs to be a human who's responsible and accountable for that. So there's a whole piece around quality control, around escalations where things aren't working. I think there's a piece around complex advice and casework that you're not going to want to delegate to an AI agent. So I think those types of roles, of that sort of oversight and governance and quality and escalation are going to be new and really important. I think there's also roles definitely around ethics and bias, because it's absolutely a risk with AI. We know that the training data that most AI tools use is inherently full of biased data, and therefore how do you make sure that you aren't implementing processes that actually are more biased than the processes you've currently got? So safeguards and controls in that space and work in that area is going to become more important.
AI just learns its bias from us, right?
But from us as humans. So you might have a team of really unbiased, extremely sophisticated HR people, but the AI training data is not from those people. It's from everything that exists in the world, which, as we know, is deeply, deeply biased.
I mentioned earlier about how a lot of that kind of automation implementation projects can sometimes be less than perfect. The same can go for a big transformation, right? So why do transformation projects fail?
At the end of the day, most transformations fail not because of the technical solutions, but because of people, culture, trust, and an inability to really change people's behaviour. I think that comes down a lot to leadership role modelling, to maybe trying to change too many things at once. Everyone focuses on getting to the point where you've implemented whatever it is, but actually that's when the real work starts, to really embed that and actually create the take-up that's needed to get the benefit from that change. So I think that's the bit that in the past hasn't worked. And I think the thing that's interesting about AI transformation is it's going to be even harder, because it's faster, it's more unpredictable, it has much more wide-ranging consequences, and it impacts knowledge work, which hasn't been, the primary impact of big transformations so far. AI strategies are higher level than business strategies because tech changes so fast, governance, legislation changes so fast. And so there's so much more leadership interpretation that's required from looking at an AI strategy to really working out what that's going to mean and what that change is going to look like. And I think that's a skill set and a capability set that leaders aren't used to using, that amount of judgment in uncertainty. And I think that brings us also to other areas where the people team can step up, which is supporting leaders with those types of new skills and capabilities, managing uncertainty, decision-making when you perhaps haven't got the full set of information, being able to iterate and continuously learn and develop when you've implemented something, so that you can quickly have feedback cycles and loops that quickly tell you what's working and what isn't, and you can tweak and change and iterate. That's a new sort of muscle for most organisations, and it's incredibly important in the context of AI change and transformation.
Yeah, I think now more than ever we need, strong CPOs leading, like steering the ship. If you're not giving your people function a seat at that top table, you really need to rethink that. It's all very well and good having, a robust HR team, but if you're not giving them that seat at that commercial steering table, then you're really missing out, and you're kind of shutting them out of being able to fully support the business in every way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's quite a risk, because I think that the potential to try and drive significant change and transformation without a CPO having a seat at that executive table and being part of the architecture and leadership of that, there's quite a high risk that will cause confusion, make it much less likely to really create benefit realisation. You're much less likely to be able to implement a really effective change and transformation. CPOs really need to work on that ability to translate business strategy into organisational and enterprise architecture. So I think that's a piece it's the next step on from taking business strategy and translating it into a people strategy. It's more than that now. It's that real organisational architecture, rooted in the future of work, that's going to be that skill set that CPOs are going to really need to bring to the table.
So we've talked a bit about kind of what our CPO, what a good CPO needs to, the kind of levelling up involved in a kind of robust CPO that's not just translating a strategy. So what skills do our people teams need to develop now, like rather than just the CPO, but what should our people teams be looking at now?
So I think there's a fundamental baseline that everybody should be looking to upskill themselves in around AI and using tools for personal effectiveness like ChatGPT, Gemini, things like that, that allow you to have a sparring partner, to improve the quality of your work, to help review large data sets, things like that. So that's something that everyone needs to look at. And then I think it depends where you're working. So, for example, people who work in teams that are more around service delivery and first-line support, I think there's skill sets around that, AI governance, system orchestration, dealing brilliantly with escalations, quality control. I think they're important skill sets. I think if you work, for example, in recruitment, there's a really important piece, again, around avoiding bias in technology. AI can't make decisions and can't be accountable. So what's the right role in the human AI partnership there that recruitment teams need to play? So becoming an expert in that piece around processes re-engineered for human AI partnership. I think then if you look at learning teams, for example, there's definitely skill sets around the utilisation of predictive analytics and data sets, creation of learning content, all those sorts of areas where you can deliver work again in partnership with AI tools to do it either better quality or faster. Maybe some of that learning administration, some of that can be done by automation, some of the thinking can be done by AI. So I think there's opportunities there. Then I think in the OD and transformation space, definitely around organisation redesign, human AI partnership, real sort of transformations, but in the context of having higher level strategies and faster pace of change. People who are working in culture and ED&I, there's a really important bit here around psychological safety and trust. And how do you create that if organisations are looking at moving to using tools that can feel a bit like a black box? You put something in and you get something out, and what's really happened in between. And then people working in tech and data, there's definitely important upskilling around data quality and assurance and GDPR. People talk about predictive analytics. If you've got a data set and that tells you potentially high performers that might be likely based on the data set to leave in the next 6 months, is it okay to have used all of that data and personal information? Is that really legitimate interest? What do you do with that information? Do you want an AI agent to make a decision on that? It predicts that someone might leave in 6 months, so not going to pay a bonus. There's all those bits around understanding what the opportunity is and what it means that people in the different functional areas can focus on upskilling in.
There's so much to it, ethically, and from a kind of like efficiency perspective, like, AI tools are brilliant because the rationale is they kind of free us up to do the big picture thinking. Then your AI friend isn't going to do your big picture creative thinking for you. It's going to be able to kind of save you time. And come up with solutions that you may not have thought of, which is, fantastic. But I think there's definitely a word of caution in here as well.
I think AI tools can be a good sparring and thinking partner, but you've got to be really careful with the prompts that you use. So, for example, often if you ask an AI tool about AI and the opportunities, it'll come back with stuff that really is about automation, not AI. And then when you point out to it that, they're two different things, it'll say, oh yeah, good spot. But if you didn't know that, you wouldn't have known that that's the information you were getting. So I think that prompt engineering, again, is something, and vibe prompting is something that, everyone can upskill on. Being aware that an AI tool is only going to give you stuff from existing data sets. So it's never going to come up with something really new, and that actually probably you need 3 or 4 prompts to get to something really useful and interesting and helpful. So that critical thinking is a really important part of working in partnership with AI tools.
Absolutely. And, the whole kind of concept of agentic. Someone spoke recently at a thing I attended, and he came up with a fantastic point, which was, you would invest so much time in a new starter. They're not going to get it right the first time. It's exactly the same with your AI agent. It's like training a new starter.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good analogy. I think the thing that's more difficult with AI is because of the breadth of information it has access to, you can quite easily end up in a situation where you're asking it about a topic that you know very little about, and therefore it's much harder to spot whether it's hallucinating or not, or whether it's AI slop rather than actually really quality data and insight. So that question around how do you validate, how do you triangulate, how do you make sure that what you're getting is robust, appropriate and valid? And I think that's a question that people are still working on.
Great. Well, there's, lots of food for thought here. I guess now from a takeaway perspective, what should CEOs be investing in today?
Definitely investing in capability around transformation, change, organisational learning and adaptability and agility. And I think all those things sit within the people remit. And so potentially investing in upskilling in the people team in order to then facilitate better transformation and change organisation-wide is a really prudent and commercially valid move at this point. I also think it's important for CEOs to be really clear on what they're trying to achieve, because there's a whole spectrum from saying, in the context of what you want to get from AI, from saying, actually, I'm just going to really maximise the AI functionality of existing tools and potentially deploy a tool across the organisation so that everybody can use that as a sparring partner, thought partner to get their work done, quicker and better quality, right through to fundamentally reimagining the entire organisation and how work gets done, starting from the lens of what are we trying to achieve and what almost not what can AI do, but what can't AI do, so that you're kind of fundamentally saying, okay, we're going to do everything we can using AI and tech, and then we're going to identify the bits that can't be done, and we're going to put the human roles in, which is completely the other end of the spectrum. So I think it's really important that organisations are clear on what are they trying to achieve, what does that look and feel like in that spectrum, how they're going to measure success, so that you can then align behind actually driving transformation in the way that's going to meet the needs of your organisation. Rather than, I think there is quite a lot of organisations rushing around trying to do stuff because they don't want to get left behind. But actually, unless you're really clear on what you're trying to do and why, I think it's even more difficult to realise benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a CEO trying to navigate that without a strong CPO by their side will be much more of a challenge, I think. Claire, it's been an absolute honour and a pleasure to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you. And yeah, absolutely. I hope people found it interesting and useful.